Want to speak real Japanese from your first lesson? Sign up for your free lifetime account at JapanesePod101.com.
Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, how do you say someone else wants to do something in Japanese if you don't use the tai form? You may have already learned that you add tai at the end of Japanese verbs to indicate that you want to do something. For example, nomitai for I want to drink and tabetai for I want to eat. So, how do you say what someone else wants to do in Japanese? If you're talking about what someone else wants to do, you have to use the ending garu or a phrase to quote someone's thought like to omotteimasu, meaning think that. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to say what someone else wants to do correctly. Let's say your female friend wants to go to the zoo. You might say, 彼女は動物園に行きたがっています。She wants to go to the zoo. Remember, in this case, you need to use がっています instead of just がる. However, you can also use tai to describe what someone else wants to do. For example, 彼女はお昼にカレーが食べたいと思っています。She wants to eat curry for lunch. In this case, you also add と思っています to quote her thought. It would literally translate as, she thinks she wants to eat curry for lunch. If you want to ask someone directly if they want to do something, you can use tai as well. For example, if you want to invite your friend for a coffee, you can say, コーヒーが飲みたいですか? Do you want to drink coffee? But a more natural way to invite someone would be, コーヒーはいかがですか? How about a coffee? How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, why do Japanese people use the simple past tense 持ちました or 持った when they're talking about something in their possessions? In Japanese, we often ask someone if they have something with them, like an umbrella or a pen, by using the simple past tense of the verb 持つ, which is 持ちました or 持った. However, in English, it's more common to say, do you have something, using the present tense. So why do Japanese people do this? 持つ is an action verb meaning to take or to hold. In Japanese, once the action is taken, the item is finished, the action is considered to be in the past. Japanese focuses on the action already being completed, which has led to the current state of having something in your possession. Let's do some examples so you can learn how to use 持つ correctly. Let's say your husband is leaving home and you just want to confirm that he has his cell phone with him. You might ask him, 携帯電話を持ちましたか? Or 携帯電話持った? Meaning, do you have your cell phone with you? In both sentences, you're confirming whether or not your husband has brought his phone from home and if it's currently in his possession. Here is another example. If the weather is bad that day, your mom might say, 雨が降りそうだから傘を持って行きなさい. If you already have it, you can respond with, もう持ったよ. I already have it with me. Again, you use the past tense of the verb 持った here. There are other verbs in Japanese that are used in the past tense where English uses them in the present tense. Two of the most common ones would be omoidashimasu, meaning to remember, and わかります, meaning to understand. This is because the action of remembering or understanding something is already finished once you have remembered or understood it. So for I remember something in Japanese, you say 思い出しました using the past tense. Also to say I understand in Japanese, you use わかりました in the past tense. It may be a little confusing at first, but once you understand the meaning behind it, you'll be sure to get it. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more comments? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, when expressing my conjecture or making a guess based on appearance, should I use soda or yoda? When you want to express conjecture or make a guess based on appearance, you may wonder whether to use soda or yoda because you often hear Japanese people use both. This lesson will cover how to use soda and yoda when expressing states or conditions with adjectives. In many cases, you can use either. However, your answer will depend on two things. One, whether your guess is based on visual information only, or two, whether you have any additional information to interpret. If you make a guess based on visual information only, you use soda. If you judge not only based on the visual information but also additional information or reasoning, you use yoda. So basically, when you use yoda, the certainty level is higher than when you use soda. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use soda and yoda correctly. Here's the first case. Let's say you go looking for your teacher, Miss Yamada, and you see she's busy talking with other teachers. In this case, you guess that she's busy based on visual information. So you can use soda like this. 先生は忙しそうだ. The sentence will naturally translate as the teacher seems busy. The next is the second case where you can get more information to judge the situation in addition to the visual information. Let's use the same situation again. This time though, you saw that she was busy, but you also tried to call her name and received no response. In this case, you received more information. You're not getting a response from her in addition to the visual information, so you judge that she's busy. In this case, you would say, 先生は忙しいようだ. The teacher must be busy. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more comments? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, what's the difference between the conditionals ba and tara? The endings ba and tara are both used for conditionals in Japanese. So how do you know which ones to use? The nuance is slightly different. If the sentence is clause A, ba, clause B, then ba will be as long as, making the condition the focus of the sentence. If the sentence is clause A, tara, clause B, then clause B can only happen if clause A is realized. First, let's do an example using both. 今すぐ行けば間に合うだろう。今すぐ行ったら間に合うだろう。Both of these sentences mean if you go right now, you would make it on time. As clause B can only happen if clause A occurs, tara is alright. However, if the focus of your sentence is the condition, if you go right now, then it would be more natural to use ba. There's a difference in nuance, but in many cases you can use both ba and tara to mean if. But there is a case where you can use only tara. If clause B is an order, recommendation, request, prohibition, wish, or volition, only tara can be used. For example, 日本に行ったら京都を訪ねてください. When you go to Japan, please visit Kyoto. Here, the speaker is making a request, therefore only tara can be used. Let's take a look at another example expressing one's volition in clause B. 日本に行ったら漫画を買います. When I go to Japan, I'll buy manga. Here, clause B expresses one's volition, therefore only tara can be used. Here's a tricky point. There is a case where you can also use ba even if the clause B expresses one's volition or request. Let's say you're shopping and you want to buy something sweet. You see some free samples and you want to try one. You might say to your friend, 美味しければ買います。美味しかったら買います。If it's delicious, I'll buy it. In this case, Class B expresses the speaker's volition, and Class A doesn't have an action verb, but it expresses the state using an adjective. In that case, you can use both ba and tara. How was this lesson? If it's confusing, don't worry, because they have almost the same meaning. If you're feeling stuck, try to focus on ba because its usage has less restrictions. Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below, and I will try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, how do I use the nominalizers no and koto correctly? Both no and koto are nominalizers. That means they can turn other parts of speech into nouns. In many cases, you can use them interchangeably. For example, 泳ぐのが好きです。泳ぐことが好きです。Both sentences mean I like to swim, and both are considered grammatically correct. So, how do you know when to use which one? Let's go over the rules so you can learn how to use no and koto correctly. Here are the cases where you need to use koto instead of no. 1. If the sentence ends with desu, da, or de aru, you have to use koto. An example is, 今年の目標は試験に合格することです。This means my target of this year is to pass the exam. Here, the sentence ends with desu, so you need to use koto. Do you remember the sentence ending phrase no desu? You can use it to explain the reason or background of a situation, as in 電車が遅れたのです, which means it's because the train was delayed. So, when you use the nominalizer before desu, you need to use koto instead of no. 2. You need to use koto if it's before fixed phrases such as routines, rules, or experiences, such as ことにする, to make it a rule to do something, or ことがある, meaning to have ever done something. You also use it before certain verbs such as ことが可能だ, to be possible to, ことが必要だ, meaning to need to, and ことに決める, meaning to decide to. Here's a situation where you need to use no instead of koto. 1. You'll need to use no for verbs that talk about perceptions like 見る, 見える, meaning to see, or 聞く, 聞こえる, to hear. That's because the original meaning of koto is thing, so it's not appropriate to use when expressing perception. For example, 友達が話しているのが聞こえました. Meaning, I heard my friends talking. Here you're perceiving what you heard and it's not related to an object, so you need to use no. How was this lesson? If it's still a little confusing, make sure to check out JapanesePod101.com for more practice. Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, why can't you say 私は息子に自転車を買ってくれた to mean I bought my son a bicycle? The meaning of kureru has the image of something being lowered down to be given to someone. Therefore, kureru is used when someone is giving me or a close person to me something and you want to show appreciation to them. So, the subject of the verb kureru cannot be watashi. So, in this case, you can't say 私は息子に自転車を買ってくれた. Instead, you need to say 私は息子に自転車を買ってあげた。Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use くれる correctly. A basic example is 友人が私に誕生日プレゼントをくれました。Meaning, my friend gave me a birthday present. You use くれる because your friend is the giver and 私 is the receiver. So it's natural to humbly use くれる and show your appreciation to the giver. Next is 友人が弟に誕生日プレゼントをくれました。Meaning, my friend gave a birthday present to my brother. In this case, your friend is the one who gave the present to your brother. Since the giver is not a family member and your brother is a family member, it is appropriate to humbly use くれる and show your appreciation to the giver. The last example is 父が息子に誕生日プレゼントをくれました。Meaning, my father gave a birthday present to my son. In this case, both the giver and the receiver are your family members, but you can use くれる to show your appreciation to your father as the giver from the same point of view as your son because you feel your son is closer than your father. Both the giver and the receiver can be your family members in sentences using くれる, but please note that the giver of the subject of the sentence using くれる can never be 私. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below, and I will try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, how do I use もらう and くれる correctly when someone gives me something? The meaning of もらう is receiving something from someone, and the meaning of くれる is someone giving something to someone. Let's use these two sentences as examples. First, 私は友達に夕食を作ってもらう. And second, 友達が私に夕食を作ってくれる. Both mean my friend will cook dinner for me. So how can you tell the difference? In the first sentence using もらう, the action is focused on I receiving my friend's cooking. In the second sentence using くれる, the action is focused on the act of my friend cooking for me and my appreciation for her cooking. Therefore, in a sentence using もらう, the subject should be the speaker, and with くれる, the subject should be the giver. Let's go through a few more examples so you can learn how to use もらう and くれる correctly. Firstly, 娘が夕食を作ってくれる. This means my daughter will cook dinner for me or us. In this situation, the giver is 娘, which is the subject of くれる, and the receiver is the speaker and uses くれる to humbly show his or her appreciation for the meal. Next, 娘に夕食を作ってもらう. This means I will have my daughter cook dinner for me or us. In this situation, I, the receiver, is the subject of the sentence. This sentence can be literally translated as I received the beneficial action of my daughter's cooking dinner. That means the speaker is appreciating the daughter cooking dinner for the speaker. If you really want to show appreciation for someone, using くれる is your best bet. It highlights the appreciation of the doer's actions, while もらう highlights the receiving of those actions. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! Bye bye! Hi everyone, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, can I use the verb 差し上げる, the polite version of あげる, when offering to help someone? Even though あげる highlights you doing something for someone, it's still too direct to use when offering help. For example, the sentence 手伝って差し上げましょうか would be regarded equally as saying 欲しいですか to a person of a higher status. In a culture of humility and indirectness, We need to be really careful about how we phrase our sentences, especially when offering help. In addition, even when you are using the very polite verb sashiageru when you give help, it doesn't necessarily mean you're actually being polite. This is because while ageru is mainly used when you give something or do something for someone, it also implies that it's worth being appreciated. Therefore, if you want to offer help, it's better to use the more polite expressions 手伝いましょうか or お手伝いいたしましょうか instead. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to offer help correctly in Japanese. 荷物を持ちましょうかお荷物をお持ちしましょうか Both sentences mean, shall I help you with your luggage or baggage? If you are casually offering help to a friend or someone of the same status as you, 荷物を持ちましょうか is alright to use. If you're offering help to someone of a higher status or an elderly person, it's better to use お荷物をお持ちしましょうか Again, you don't use あげる or 差し上げる, but just use ましょうか meaning shall I? Let's do another example. 水を買ってきましょうか This sentence literally translates as should I go and buy some water for you? In this case, you need to use ましょうか with a verb phrase meaning to go and buy something, 買ってくる, and say 買ってきましょうか Here, we offer help without using あげる to avoid highlighting your own action of helping. Just remember, あげる and 差し上げる are both used to highlight the giver's favor in the situation. If that giver is you, it's better to avoid it. Offer help with a nice and humble しましょうか How was this lesson? Did you get everything? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below, and I will try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, do 思い出します and 覚えています mean the same thing? Both sentences can translate as I remember something. So can you say both? Let's go over the differences so you can understand how to say I remember in Japanese correctly. Imagine that your mind is a box, and when you remember a thought, you take it out of the box. This imaginary is reflected in the phrase 思い出します. This is actually a compound verb made up of 思います to think and 出します to take something out. That's why when you say you've just remembered something, you use 思い出します in the past tense 思い出しました. Essentially, you brought the thought out of the box of your mind. If something has been on your mind for a long time or is something that stands out clearly in your memory, it's better to use 覚えています. This is the tail form of a verb 覚えます, literally meaning to retain in the memory, combined with います, that state of continuing. So there are two ways to say I remember in Japanese, which are 思い出しました and 覚えています. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use 思い出します and 覚えています correctly. Let's first do an example with 思い出します. やっとパスワードを思い出しました. I finally remembered or recalled the password. In this sentence, the person has just been able to bring that thought to his or her brain. Therefore, we use the past tense 思い出しました. This is keeping with the idea that the thought has been taken out of the box of your mind. Now, let's do an example with 覚えています. この単語の意味を覚えていますか? はい、覚えています. Do you remember the meaning of this word? Yes, I do. Here, person A is asking whether or not person B has retained the meaning of this word in his or her memory. So we use 覚えています. A good tip for sounding like a native is using 思い出した when you've just remembered something. Like that ああ moment when you've realized something you've forgotten. For example, 思い出した。今日はテストがあるんだった。This means, I remember it now. Today we have a test. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, how do I express gratitude in Japanese correctly at work? There are so many ways to express gratitude in Japanese. お疲れ様でした。ご苦労様でした。お手数をおかけしました。How do you know which ones to use and when? These expressions are all used for appreciation, but there are distinct differences. Let's go over them one by one. The phrase お疲れ様でした is used to pay respect to someone who worked hard or did a good job. It's a phrase used amongst colleagues and coworkers casually or humbly with people in higher positions. It shows respect for everyone and the work that they do. The phrase ご苦労様でした on the other hand, is used to recognize the efforts of someone in a lower position than you. For example, you can use it when receiving a package from a delivery person at your house. As a customer, you're considered to be in a higher position. Lastly, we have the phrase お手数をおかけしました. This phrase is also used to thank people for their efforts, but has an apologetic tone as if someone put in a lot of effort to help you. It can often be used with an apology, 申し訳ありませんでした. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use these phrases correctly. First, with お疲れ様でした. 部長、会議はもう終わったんですか? お疲れ様でした. Oh, department chief, has the meeting finished already? You must be tired. Here, a person in a higher position is coming back from an important meeting. Therefore, you're showing respect for his or her hard work. Now, let's do an example with ご苦労様でした. 配達ご苦労様でした. This phrase literally translates as, thank you for your work of delivery. Here, you are appreciating the work done by the person who has delivered your package. Again, as a customer, you are in the higher position. Last, let's do an example with お手数をおかけしました. お手数をおかけし、申し訳ありませんでした. This phrase literally translates as, I apologize for bothering you and giving you some extra work to go through. Here, you are recognizing the effort someone went through a lot to help you. Once you start getting the hang of Japanese, you realize that the simple arigato is really not enough to get your point across. Although none of these phrases are required for any situation, learning the nuances and appreciating their meanings bring you one step closer to really understanding Japanese. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, what's the difference between 知る and わかる? Both 知る and わかる can be translated as to know. So how do you know which ones to use? Let's go over the differences together. 知る is used when you gain new information or knowledge. わかる is used when you understand, grasp, or comprehend something. It's also used when you discover something, make a judgment, or decide on a solution. Let's do some examples so you can learn how to use 知る and わかる correctly. First, let's do an example with 知る. 駅までの道を知っています. This phrase means I know the way or route to the station. In this situation, the route to the station is something you simply know. 知る is an action verb meaning to learn or to gain something new. So when it's used to mean to know, you need to use it in the te form plus imasu, as in 知っています。Now, let's do an example with わかる。この文の意味がわかりました。This phrase literally means, I now understand the meaning of this sentence. In this situation, the speaker was unable to grasp the meaning of the sentence before, but now has complete understanding of it. That's why in this case we use わかる in the past tense, わかりました, to express that the meaning has already been understood. How was this lesson? Did you get everything? Make sure to visit JapanesePod101.com for more practice. Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, what's the difference between 知りません and わかりません when both mean I don't know in English? You may already know that 知る means to know as in to obtain knowledge and information, and わかる means to understand as in to fully comprehend something. In their negative forms, わかりません and 知りません carry the same nuance. Therefore, 知りません means you have no knowledge of something, and わかりません means you don't understand something. But わかりません also means you can't find the answer or you can't give an answer, and it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have knowledge. Let's do some examples so you understand how to use 知りません and わかりません correctly. First, let's do an example with 知りません。この人を知っていますか？知りません。Do you know this person? No, I don't. In this phrase, person A is asking about the knowledge person B has of that person. Since person B has no knowledge of that person, 知りません is used. Now, let's do an example with わかりません。今年のクリスマスは雪が降るかどうかわかりません。This means, I don't know if we'll have snow on Christmas Day this year. Whether it will snow or not has nothing to do with your knowledge of snow. No one can fully predict the weather. Therefore, in this case, you use わかりません to literally mean that you can't give an answer whether it'll snow or not. There are some cases where you can use either 知りません or わかりません. For example, あれ、先生はどこですか？知りません。わかりません。Oh, where's the teacher? I don't know. In this situation, person B has no knowledge of the teacher's whereabouts and can't find the answer. Therefore, you can use either 知りません or わかりません. However, it may seem a little cold to use 知りません when you can use either one. Therefore, if you know both are okay, it's better to use わかりません. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, how do I use dekiru to talk about making a new friend or family member in Japanese? You may already know that dekiru means to be able to. However, you can also use it in a few other situations. Dekiru also means something has been made or completed. Therefore, you can use it in this situation. 新しいビルができました。The new building was built or made. You can also use it when you've made a friend or have fallen in love with someone because it can be literally translated as a friend is made in Japanese. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use できる correctly. 妹ができました. This phrase literally translated as I got a younger sister. The nuance is that your mother has just given birth and has essentially made you a sister. Let's do another example. 新しいお父さんができました. This phrase means I've got a stepfather. Literally, I have a new father. You would use this if your mother got divorced and then remarried, thus making her new husband your new father. Remember, you can't say 先生ができました if you get a new teacher. This is because as long as there are lessons, there's always a teacher. You can say 新しいクラスメートができました I have a new classmate, because that's not something that's guaranteed. Something has been essentially made where nothing was before. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I'll try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, in the sentence, このプランで申し込みます. Why do you use the particle で instead of を? Since を marks the direct object in the sentence, many Japanese learners ask why で is used in this sentence. Just like other particles in Japanese, で has a new different meanings. One is, when you choose something out of a list of choices in the sentence, このプランで申し込みます. The implication is that you choose this plan over other plans. For example, if you go to McDonald's and decide on something from the list of options, you could say Lで or more politely Lでお願いします. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use で correctly. 喫煙室と禁煙室がございます. 禁煙で We have smoking rooms and non-smoking rooms. Non-smoking. In this short conversation, you choose non-smoking out of the two options that were presented to you. So you need to use で. Let's do another example. このコートをください. サイズは M. 色は白で. Literally, I'd like this coat medium white. In this sentence, you've selected your size and the color you want from many different choices, so you also need to use で in this case. As particles has so many different meanings, you don't have to master all of them at the same time. Learning how each one works little by little helps you understand all of their meanings more clearly. How was this lesson? Did you get everything? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I'll try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, what are the differences between 冷やす, 冷える, 冷ます, and 冷める? These expressions can be divided into two groups, 冷やす versus 冷える, and 冷ます versus 冷める. 冷やす and 冷ます are both transactive verbs, which means they take one or more objects. 冷える and 冷める are both intransactive verbs, which means they do not allow any object. Let's break it down together. First, let's start with 冷やす versus 冷える. These two verbs have the meaning of an object falling from room temperature to cold. Therefore, it means to make something change to a state of being cold. The focus is on the cooling down. For example, ビールが冷える. Beer gets or becomes cold. ビールを冷やす. I make my beer cold. In sentence A, the beer goes from room temperature to cold naturally, like after you leave it in the fridge for a while. In sentence B, you purposefully make it cold in order to drink it. With 冷ます versus 冷める, the focus is on the temperature falling from hot to room temperature. As the original object has heat in it, it's the action of that heat being released. It's often used for liquids, for example, コーヒーが冷める. Coffee gets or becomes cold or lukewarm. コーヒーを冷ます. Make coffee cold or lukewarm. In the first sentence, your coffee becomes cold or room temperature naturally, like when you leave it out for a while. In the second sentence, you made it colder on purpose so you're able to drink it. In both cases, the heat is taken away. As these all sound very similar, it may be difficult for you to remember all of their meanings. One way to remember is, if you remember the verbs starting with H in the alphabet, 冷やす and 冷える, You can associate them with the adjective hikui, meaning low, as in lowering the temperature. For the verbs starting with s, samasu and sameru, you can imagine the temperature dropping from hot to a more soothing temperature. How was this lesson? Did you get everything? Make sure to go to JapanesePod101.com for more practice. Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. Mata ne! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, what is the difference between 雨が降っているのに傘をささないの and 雨が降っていても傘をささないの? Both of these expressions are asking why someone is not using an umbrella in the rain. But is there a difference? The meaning of noni and temo are a little bit different. Noni means despite, in spite of, or although, while temo means even if, even though, or even when. For example, if you and your friend are about to go out on a rainy day and you see she isn't carrying an umbrella, you might say, 雨が降っているのに傘をささないの? Literally, this means you don't use an umbrella although it's raining. However, if your friend says she often doesn't use an umbrella in general, you might say, 雨が降っていても傘をささないの? You don't use an umbrella even when it's raining. Temo is often used in hypothetical situations. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use noni and temo correctly. Let's first do an example with noni. どうしたの? 旅行に行きたいのに仕事を休めないの? What's wrong? Although I want to go on a trip, I can't take days off from work. These sentences are not hypothetical. They're talking about a real situation. In this case, noni is used to express that despite the fact that person B wants to take a trip, he or she is unable to because of the inability to get off work. Now, let's do an example with temo. 仕事はそんなに忙しいの? 旅行に行きたくても仕事を休めないの? Is your job that busy? Even if I want to go on a trip, I can't take days off from work. In this situation, person A and person B are talking about how busy person B is at work. Therefore, person B used the hypothetical situation of going on a trip to highlight how busy he or she is. Person B is not talking about actually wanting to go. The best way to practice using noni and temo is by starting with simple sentences and choosing whether you want to say although or even if. Then you can pick which one you should use more easily. How was this lesson? Did you get everything? Make sure to go to JapanesePod101.com for more practice. Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I'll try to answer them. Mata ne! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is to eat soup in Japanese, スープを飲む or スープを食べる. When talking about consumption, we have the choice of using 飲む or 食べる. Sometimes it's a little difficult to know which one to use. A simple way to remember is that if you don't chew, you use 飲む. As soup is a liquid, something you don't chew, you would say スープを飲む. If it's not a liquid or anything you would need to eat with a fork, you use 食べる. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use 飲む and 食べる correctly. Let's first do an example with 飲む. 味噌汁を飲みます. This sentence would translate as I eat miso soup. Since it's basically a liquid and something we don't chew, we use 飲む. But like some soup, some people use 食べる when they eat miso soup or stew with a lot of ingredients. Like in this next example, シチューを食べる. This sentence means I eat stew. In this case, stew is technically a liquid, but there are usually many types of solid food used in stew, so it all depends on how much chewing you think you're doing. From that, you can decide which verb to use. I explained earlier that a simple way to remember is that if you don't chew, you use 飲む. But when the object is not liquid or doesn't have liquid, you always use 食べる, even if you don't chew. For example, ゼリーを食べる. This means I eat jelly. Even if you don't chew jelly, it's not liquid, so you use 食べる. On the other hand, there is a case where you use 飲む for something that's not liquid. When you take a medicine, you would say 薬を飲む. I take medicine. Although some medicines are solid, it's not something that you typically chew, and also you usually drink water together with medicine, so you use 飲む. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, are the meanings of 冷蔵庫にジュースを冷やしておきます and 冷蔵庫にジュースが冷やしてあります the same? In these sentences, we're talking about the differences between ておく and てある. Let's break down the differences together. We use ておく when the focus is on the action, while てある is used when the focus is on the state or condition caused by the action. To put it more simply, ておく highlights an action to be done in advance for some special purpose, while てある mentions the past actions. But the point is that the state which the past action caused is still continuing. In the case of the sentences we mentioned, 冷蔵庫にジュースを冷やしておきます means that you leave some juice in the fridge to chill so that someone can drink it later. If you say 冷蔵庫にジュースが冷やしてあります the implication is that I put juice in the fridge a while ago and it's still chilling in there. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use ておく and てある correctly. First, let's do an example with ておく. 明日までに会議用の資料を作っておきます This means I'll get the documents for meeting done by tomorrow. Here, you are focusing on the action of finishing the documents by tomorrow because you need them for the meeting tomorrow. That's why you need to use ておく. Now, let's do an example with てある. 机にメモが置いてある This means there's a note on my desk. In this sentence, someone put a note on your desk in the past, but the point is that the note is still there, focusing on the continued state of the note existing on your desk. ておく and てある sound very similar, but if you think of the original verbs 置く to put and ある to exist or to be, it's easier to understand why ておく has focus on the action to put or place something, and てある has focus on the state of being. How was this lesson? Did you get everything? Make sure you get over to JapanesePod101.com and keep practicing. Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below, and I will try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, are the meanings of 冷蔵庫にジュースを冷やしておきます and 冷蔵庫にジュースが冷やしてあります the same? In these sentences, we're talking about the differences between ておく and てある. Let's break down the differences together. We use ておく when the focus is on the action, while てある is used when the focus is on the state or condition caused by the action. To put it more simply, ておく highlights an action to be done in advance for some special purpose, while てある mentions the past actions. But the point is that the state which the past action caused is still continuing. In the case of the sentences we mentioned, 冷蔵庫にジュースを冷やしておきます means that you leave some juice in the fridge to chill so that someone can drink it later. If you say 冷蔵庫にジュースが冷やしてあります the implication is that I put juice in the fridge a while ago and it's still chilling in there. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use ておく and てある correctly. First, Let's do an example with ておく。明日までに会議用の資料を作っておきます。This means I'll get the documents for meeting done by tomorrow. Here, you are focusing on the action of finishing the documents by tomorrow because you need them for the meeting tomorrow. That's why you need to use ておく. Now, let's do an example with てある。机にメモが置いてある。This means there's a note on my desk. In this sentence, someone put a note on your desk in the past, but the point is that the note is still there, focusing on the continued state of the note existing on your desk. ておく and てある sound very similar, but if you think of the original verbs 置く to put and ある to exist or to be, it's easier to understand why ておく has focus on the action to put or place something, and てある has focus on the state of being. How was this lesson? Did you get everything? Make sure you get over to JapanesePod101.com and keep practicing. Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below, and I will try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, what's the difference between 違う and 間違う? Both 違う and 間違う are related to making a mistake, so how do you know which one to use? 違う is used when two things don't correspond or match or the information is incorrect. The basic way you can remember it is A does not equal B. For example, if you have the wrong telephone number, as in it's simply different from the correct one, you would say 電話番号が違う. However, if you accidentally misdialed that number, you would say 電話番号を間違えた using 間違う. This is because 間違う means that someone does something wrong or makes a mistake instead of something just being incorrect. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use 違う and 間違う correctly. First, let's do an example with 違う. 山田さんですか? いいえ、違います. Are you Mr. or Miss Yamada? No, I'm not. This is a typical usage of 違う. In this case, no, I'm not would more directly translate as no, you're mistaken. Person A simply has the wrong information about who person B is. Now let's do an example with 間違う. 塩と砂糖を間違うと大変だ. In this case, we're talking about the potential of someone actually mistaking salt for sugar. Let's do one more example. あなたの考えは間違っているよ. Your thinking is incorrect, which is equivalent to you're wrong. While 間違う focuses on the act of making mistakes, using it in the form of 間違っている can also be used to highlight that something is wrong, incorrect, or unjust. Remember that while 違う and 間違う may be similar in the fact that they both involve mistakes, they both come from different views. 間違う is about the mistake being made and 違う is about incorrect information. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Make sure to go to JapanesePod101.com for more practice. Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, when do I use 家 or 家 when I read the kanji for house? There are two readings, 家 and 家 for the kanji for house. So how do you know which one to use? 家 refers to the actual building where a family lives. 家 refers to both where those people live and who those people are. 家 also refers to your in-group of people. You can think of it as 家 is house and 家 is home. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use 家 and 家 correctly. First, let's do an example with 家. 新しい家に引っ越したい. This phrase means I want to move to a new house. Here, you're referring to a new building where you want to live. Therefore, we need to use 家. Now, let's do an example with 家. 仕事が早く終わったので早く家に帰れました。As I finished work early, I could come back home early. Here, you're referring to not only the building where you live, but you're also implying going home to the other people who are living there. It also has the nuance of going back to a place of belonging. Let's do one more example. うちの猫は大きいです。My cat is big. This is a typical usage of うち in reference to your in-group. The sentence implies that you're talking about your house cat or the family cat. That's why in this case, うち is usually translated as my or our. In many cases, 家 and うち can be used interchangeably. However, again, if you think of 家 as house and うち as home, you can grasp that difference in nuance more easily. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! Bye bye! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, if dekuru means to begin to, what's the difference between dekuru and shihajimeru? Dekuru and shihajimeru both relate to something starting, so how do you know which one to use? The verb dekuru has the verb kuru to come in it. That means that while it may translate as start, the nuance is that the action was not occurring in the past and essentially came to the present. So the focus is in the change from not raining in the past to raining now. On the other hand, with shihajimeru, the focus is on the starting point of the action and the past is not in the picture. It also implies that the action will continue for some time. For example, if we use the similar sentence, 雨が降り始めた, it would also translate as it started raining, but the imagery would only focus on when the rain started and the likelihood of it continuing. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use dekuru and shihajimeru correctly. First, let's do an example with dekuru. 最近寒くなってきました. This phrase means it started to become colder or it's been getting cold. In this case, we can't use shihajimeru because it's not talking about the starting point of the action. Rather, it's talking about a change in state starting in the past. Now, let's do an example with し始める. 明日論文を書き始めます. This phrase means I'll start writing the thesis tomorrow. Here, you're focusing on the start of the action of writing, which will happen tomorrow. That's why, in this case, you need to use し始める. The key to understanding certain expressions in Japanese is point of view as well as focus. In order to understand the difference between similar expressions, grasping the concept and building an image is helpful. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, what's the difference between 手伝う and 助ける? Both verbs translate as to help in Japanese, so how do you know which ones to use? 手伝う means to lend a hand in order to lighten the burden of someone's work or labor. It means the person who offers help would do the same work as the other person. 助ける means to help a person when he or she is in crisis or danger. 助ける is more often used in the context of rescue than just helping someone with chores. You can also sometimes use 手伝う and 助ける with the same sentence, but the meaning will change. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use 手伝う and 助ける correctly. First, let's do an example with 手伝う. 夕食を作るのを手伝います. This means I'll help you cook dinner. In this case, you're talking about helping with a household chore in order to lighten the burden of the person cooking. Therefore, you need to use 手伝う. Now, let's do an example with 助ける. 助けて! Help! This would be a phrase you yell if you were in immediate danger or crisis. Because you need saving or rescuing, the correct verb to use would be 助ける in the te form. Lastly, let's show similar sentences using both 手伝う and 助ける. 日本語の宿題をやっているんだけど手伝ってくれる？日本語の宿題をやっているんだけど助けてくれる？ Both sentences literally translate as I'm working on my homework for Japanese, but will you help me? However, in the first sentence using 手伝う, it could just mean the student is lazy and could use an extra hand with some papers. However, in the second sentence with 助ける, it implies that the work is too difficult and that person really needs some help. As both 手伝う and 助ける translate as help, you need to think about what kind of help you need in order to choose one over the other. Is it help to reduce your workload or is it to help save you from danger? These are simple questions you can ask yourself when trying to figure out which verb to use. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, what's the difference between 行きました and 行っていました? 行きました is the simple past tense of the verb 行く meaning to go. Therefore, it simply means I went. The phrase 行っていました has the te form of 行く plus います, which is often used for progressive states. Therefore, 行っていました means went somewhere and continue to be there. As the phrase is in the past, the acts of both going and staying have already occurred. More simply, 行きました answers the questions 夏休みはどこに行きましたか? or 夏休みは何をしましたか? meaning, where did you go during summer vacation? or what did you do during summer vacation? 行っていました answers 夏休みの間どこに行っていましたか? or 夏休みの間何をしていましたか? Literally, where have you been during summer vacation? Or, what were you doing during summer vacation? Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use 行きました and 行っていました correctly. First, let's do an example with 行きました。夏休みどこに行きましたか? 東大寺に行きました。Where did you go on summer vacation? I went to the Todaiji temple. Here, the question is only asking about an event that occurred in the past, so we need to use 行きました. Now, let's do an example with 行っていました. The question is, 夏休みは何をしていましたか? 医療ボランティアとして事故で怪我した人々を助けていました。What were you doing during summer vacation? As medical volunteer, I was helping injured people because of accidents. In this situation, the person is asking about the continued state of the action. What were you doing? That's why we have to use 行っていました in this case. ていました can describe the progressive action or state that occurred at one point in the past, but it also means an action or state continued for some time. This is the big difference between any simple past verb and progressive past verb. How was this lesson? Did you get everything? Make sure to get on over to JapanesePod101.com for more practice. Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. またね! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, when it's difficult to do something, which expression should I use? There are many ways to express that something is difficult in Japanese, so how do you know which expression to use and when? にくい, 硬い, and つらい all have slightly different meanings. Let's go over them together. にくい means that something is difficult to do or it takes great effort to do. For example, if I say 言いにくい, it means that it's difficult for me to say something. It could be because it's sensitive matter or it's hard to put into words. 硬い means doing something that's almost impossible. For example, if we use a similar example as the one we used previously, 言い難い means you're almost not able to put something into words. づらい means that you don't feel comfortable doing something. If you use a similar example to the two used previously, Iizurai would mean that there's something that I want to say, but I don't feel comfortable saying it, and that's why it's difficult. Let's go through some examples so you can learn how to use nikui, gatai, and zurai. First, let's do an example with nikui. この料理はとても見た目がいいけど食べにくい。This phrase means this dish is very well presented, but it's difficult to eat. Imagine you were served a Japanese dinner that looks too beautiful or intricate to eat. The meaning implies the activity is difficult to do, so we need to use nikui. Now let's do an example with gatai. 信じがたいことだけど本当です。This phrase means it's difficult to believe, but it's true. In this situation, it means that the information you received seems so far-fetched or out there that it's almost impossible to believe. That's why we need to use gatai. Lastly, let's do an example with zurai. 泣いている母を置いて出発しづらい。This phrase means it's difficult for me to depart leaving crying mother behind. Imagine if you have to leave your mother when she's really upset or in tears. That can mean an uncomfortable situation that you can't shake. That's why you would use zurai. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. Mata ne! See you! Hi everybody, Hiroko here. Welcome to Ask a Teacher, where I'll answer some of your most common Japanese questions. The question for this lesson is, what's the difference between wake ni wa ikanai and wake ga nai? The dictionary form of a verb plus wake ni wa ikanai means that it's impossible to do something. It implies not only that you can't, but you're not allowed in light of social etiquette or common sense. It's used in matters of right and wrong. For example, if you say, 行くわけにはいかない, it means you can't go anywhere under any circumstances because it's against the rules or it will be bad for your social standing. The dictionary form of a verb plus wake ga nai means there's no reason why or it's impossible for. In this case, the connotation has more to do with not making sense or there being no reason to do something. Therefore, 行くわけがない means it's impossible to go, with the implication that it just doesn't make sense considering the situation. Let's do some examples so you can learn how to use わけにはいかない and わけがない correctly. First, let's do an example with わけにはいかない。一人でやるのは大変ですが、みんな忙しそうなので手伝ってもらうわけにはいきません。This sentence means it's difficult to do it alone, but since everyone seems so busy, I cannot ask them for help. It's implying that they are aware of the social rules that interrupting others who are busy in order for them to help me with my own work is wrong. Therefore, even though it's difficult, they have to do it on their own, and we use わけにはいかない. Now, let's do an example with わけがない。日本語がそんなに早くマスターできるわけがない。This sentence means it's impossible to be able to master Japanese that quickly. Japanese is a difficult language to learn, and there's no way that someone will be able to master Japanese at such a fast pace. Lastly, let's do an example with both. 私は車で来たので、お酒を飲むわけにはいきません。彼は車で来たので、お酒を飲むわけがありません。I came by car, so I'm definitely not allowed to drink alcohol. He came by car, so he shouldn't drink alcohol at all. In the first sentence, the implication is that because I drove, I shouldn't drink because drinking and driving is wrong. In the second sentence, we are talking about someone else who drove, and it doesn't make any sense that they would have drunk in the current situation because that person always follows the rules. How was this lesson? Pretty interesting, right? Do you have any more questions? Leave them in the comments below and I will try to answer them. Mata ne! See you!